Hello there. According to this, I am now live. Hey, thank you for joining me. Another hectic day today, and I apologize again for being a little late coming on, but at least I'm on here. I'm also sorry I couldn't do the show last week, but similarly to where I am right now, I just had so much work that had to be tended to. And a lot of it is frankly holiday related because I have presents that I'm making for friends and family. And I've got commissioned artwork as well that people want in time for Christmas. So I'm running myself a little bit ragged right now. And on top of this, I've been doing a lot of reorganization in my home. I've probably spoken a little too much about this uh, closet that's taking on mythological proportions, not unlike that of Fibber McGee, the old radio show, if anyone's familiar with that, from the running gag they had about his overpacked closet and how he'd open the door and everything would spell out. And yes, it was radio, but it was a great gag because they had wonderful sound effects and they left it to your imagination and they kept building it and building it over the years to where it just got worse and worse. And of course, it was always, well, I got to clean out that closet someday. That was the running gag line of Fibber McGee. Hi, Renee. Thank you for joining. And truthfully, my hallway closet is not too far off from that. And what I thought was going to be an easy project has been anything but because I had so much crammed in there. And I've been, it's just a slow process sorting through it, like donate, keep, put in storage, what have you, never ending. A lot more clothing than I ever thought that I had, shoes. Plus, I have art supplies, art, canvases, and I live in a little apartment. And there's just a finite amount of space where you can put these things. And hi, Kelly, thank you for joining also. Um, I've been trying to defeat the law of physics, thinking that somehow I could magically cram more into this space than, than is physically possible. And it just reached the breaking point after about a decade of living here where I just needed to start addressing it. And it's been it's been overwhelming. Let's put it that way, really overwhelming. And on top of that, just my work for Dr. Whimsy, the 3 live streams a week. This one, which is pretty simple because I just talk about stuff and talk with you guys. Whimsy's 2 shows do involve more preparation and work, and it is a much bigger audience. But anyway, it's 3 live streams a week that I do. My art commissions, my work as Dr. Whimsy's assistant, and then I've just been one day this apartment will come together. You know, if I were to turn this camera around, you would see a multitude of sins in here, boxes everywhere still. And more stuff I'm going to have to either throw out or put in storage if I'm going to recognize my dream of having this apartment like something out of a Pottery Barn catalog. The Ralph Lauren flagship store in Beverly Hills, which if you've never been, it's quite impressive. I've often said that when I die and go to the other side, if we get to have our heaven be anything we want it to be, I want my suite of rooms in heaven to be Ralph Lauren flagship storeroom. We'll see how that works out. Pardon me there. I took a drink too fast. And of course, this is live, so I couldn't cut away there. Thankfully, only 2 people are watching at this moment. Please excuse me. So I'm waiting for some more people to come on. And let's see, we have Barb Young here. Thank you for joining. Hi. Hello, everyone. Just wanted to wait for a few more people here. That's why I'm just babbling a little bit here before I get into some things of more substance. Let's see. Always Kelly's thing. I so understand. It's amazing how much stuff we accumulate. Oh, yeah, I'm okay. I was taking a drink and I chugged too fast and I choked on it, and so I was saying because it's live, I can't cut away. So you saw me coughing there. But yeah, this is a great little apartment. I emphasize great and little. It's a beautiful 1941 apartment with crown molding and a fireplace, and it's Art Deco, hardwood floors, French windows. I just fell in love with it when I first stepped in here when I was looking for another apartment. But the downside of it is, the little side of it is, it's just a challenge. It's not like I have a whole lot of stuff, but when you have a little space, it's an ongoing challenge, especially when you buy new thing like new clothes, new shirts, suits, things like that. At the time, it doesn't seem a big deal, but once it starts to overtake your closets, it is. And it was the point also because I am a professional artist. I have like blank canvases, painted canvases all over the place, and art supplies. And I was just getting sick of stacking it everywhere and just ruining the overall aesthetics of this great little apartment. I want to get it back to where it was 10 years ago when I first fell in love with it and I first envisioned what it was going to look like. My zodiac sign is a Cancer. And us cancers are extremely home oriented. We build a nest. We like to surround ourselves with beautiful things. We like to surround ourselves with things that have sentimental value and energy, and so yeah, I will never be a minimalist, and I will forever have eclectic decor because it will always be a mixture of many different things fit into one little space. What was this? Oh, yeah, so I'm saying here, same apartment for 10 years. Wow. No, I don't think that's so remarkable. You understand, I hate moving. I hate it. I know people who literally move every 2 or 3 years. They're extremely nomadic. They can't stay in one place. I'm the opposite. Once I have gone through the hell of moving, and I mean the hell of moving, I am not eager to repeat that experience. The last apartment I had for 29 years until, thanks to rent control and some very unscrupulous landlords who wanted us all out, I had to give up the apartment. Got a nice little settlement and a lawsuit over it, but nonetheless, I had to move and I had to find another place. And Los Angeles, it's hard to get apartments in Los Angeles. I found that to be very true. In fact, I was in panic mode for a while. When I got my settlement for the other apartment and I had 6 months to move, I thought, well, 6 months is a lot of time. But after like a month or two, I wasn't getting anything. I was looking everywhere. I even went to one of those apartment agencies, where you pay a fee and you get early access to listings. And hi, Joyce, thank you for joining. I swear, every single listing, when I would call the landlords, oh, we're sorry, this has already been rented. This has been rented. And I began to wonder, am I going to be living in my car? Am I going to be able to get another apartment? And it was finally a friend of mine who keeps up with Craigslist saw a listing for this apartment. It had literally just popped up on Craigslist and he called me, sent me the pictures. I looked at the photos and I thought, wow, I love this. This is too good to be true. This is exactly what I want just from the photos. Got on the phone. Um, Thankfully, this was at the time, this was one of the last apartment buildings in the city that was not being managed by some conglomerate. It was an actual kind of like a mom and pop thing, where it was just one single owner, and I managed to reach the owner on the phone. And it was a Sunday evening, and it came up in conversation about our cats. And because I guess I probably asked, do you allow cats? Oh my God, we love cats. I love cats. There must be 30 cats here in this unit. And that broke the ice. We had a really lovely conversation. And it was like 8 o'clock on a Sunday night. He said, "Hey, you want to come down here and see the apartment?" I was like, "Yeah." Came down and loved it, only to find out there was a waiting list of about, this is what he told me, of nearly 100 people trying to get this apartment. So I pulled out the stops. I actually wrote an essay, like 2 or 3 pages, on why I love this apartment so much and why it would mean so much to me, and I even offered, I was lucky I had some savings. I offered to pay 1 year of rent in advance if they'd let me have the apartment. Well, that did the trick, but I had to go to extraordinary means. That's how hard it was for me to get an apartment in this city. And, so when somebody says, "Well, you've been in that apartment for 10 years," trust me, I wanna hold on to this apartment as long as possible, and I do not wanna have to move again. I may have to, but I don't want to. What's this, Kelly? My house is 885 square feet. Storage gets creative. Yeah, that's about where I am. Storage gets creative. You're probably like me. You end up putting stuff behind chairs, stuff behind the couch. Like here, I have canvas paintings behind this couch, underneath the couch. Uh, my big screen TV, I have stuff hidden behind that. Yeah, we get very creative with storage. Um, what was this here? Goddess Val, greetings from South Florida. I'm watching on TV tonight. Pardon me for not commenting any further. Hello, everyone. Well, but thank you for watching. Well, it looks like I'm getting enough people here that I don't have to keep talking about this apartment. And of course, thank you for joining me, because I did play hooky last week. I didn't do a show last Monday. I did put an announcement on that I wouldn't be available, but I just was so overwhelmed for all the things that I've talked about, and that's why I just needed to not do a show last week, but I wanted to be back this week. It was very important that I do so, and because that's out of loyalty to all of you people who stick with me, and I really appreciate you all very much. And hi, Andy. Hi, Andy. You joined also. You're all coming on here. Um, I figured, the big thing you're going to want me to talk about is, of course, Rob Reiner. Being here in the city, getting I it's been all over the local news here, and of course the national news, social media, but local news does tend to give a bit of an inside track. No, Andy, I never met Rob Reiner, but I'm going to get to that. I have a couple of friends who did, who were actually worked with him, but I'll get to that a little bit later. But I never had the privilege of meeting him. As far as All in the Family goes, the only one I actually got to meet was Sally Struthers. Met her in person, and I also saw her in a stage play. I also saw Gene Stapleton on stage once. It was a one-woman play about Eleanor Roosevelt, but that's about as far as it came. No, Andy, I didn't know his dad either, but yeah, Carl Reiner was quite brilliant. Um, but I was just going to say, because I live in LA, we get a lot of really good entertainment news stories here on the local news. My sister was out here visiting once, and she said, "I can't believe they're talking about stuff like this on the news." And I had to remind her, yeah, but here it's the local industry, show business, the television, the movies, music, the studios. This is all part of the industry here. So that's why it does get covered on the news. Um, but I saw already on the news a bit of the media circus outside of their house in Brentwood. And I immediately reminded me of when Michael Jackson died. And I did go out to his home after it happened, like a day or two later. And it, just cameras, reporters everywhere, the very um, the very definition of media circus. And of course, people were leaving flowers, teddy bears, lit candles, signs, notes everywhere. So I would imagine it'll be very similar like that to the Reiner household. Um, but I Yeah, I know, Andy, there are some eerie parallels to Gene Hackman and his wife and what happened. Um, my God, we can think of several stories here, but this is just an unbelievable tragedy under any circumstances. Certainly brings to mind things like the Menendez brothers. How they murdered their mother and father, and of course, I'm sure you all know by now, it was Rob and Michelle's son, Nick, who stabbed the two of them to death. And we're learning more about it. The police here have been quite conservative about this, as they should be. Like when it was being first covered on the local news yesterday, um, I was watching the 6 o'clock local news, and it wasn't until about halfway through the show they interrupted with the bulletin, and they would not even say that it was Rob and Michelle Reiner. What they said, because they had to be responsible also. All they would say was it was a man who was 78 and a woman who was 68, and they had been murdered inside the Rob Reiner mansion in Brentwood. As far as they could say. And of course, as the news went on, it went on after the hour. It was such a big story. They did reveal it was actually Rob and Michelle Reiner. But the fact that it was their own son, rumors started on social media last night. I saw the first things I saw were from People magazine saying, quote unquote, insiders say it was their son. That was the first I saw of it. And then a few other things trickled out, but it wasn't really till this morning. When I was watching the morning news that they confirmed that it was their son, Nick. But so it just makes it a tragedy on just a multitude of levels, and I just feel so bad for their daughter, who she found her parents. And I can only imagine what it would be like to lose both your parents so violently, and then to have it be your own brother who did this. So I'm sure the family is just torn apart right now. um what was this? I was just checking to see if any comments here. um but the story is still unfolding. You're going to get the news like I am. It is going to be a hot story for days and days to come. What was this, Andy? Chuck, what's this about something at 7:20 called Captivating Chronicles? Chuck, what's this about something at 7:20 called Captivating Chronicles? I don't know what you mean. I know I call this show Chuck's Captivating Chat, and my channel is Chuck's Captivating Chronicles. I don't know. I might have typed it in too fast. I was in a hurry to get on here. I might have did I put in Chuck's Captivating Chat or Chronicles in my title? I don't know. Sorry. I'll have to revise that after the show if I did it incorrectly. Um, yeah, I was having trouble logging on today. It wouldn't let me type in the information. I had to log out, log in, log out a couple of times before I could actually get it on there. So that might be, but anyway, this has all the makings. Unfortunately, this is a town that loves scandals, has a fascination with scandals going all the way back to the 19 teens and 20s and Hollywood. So when you have someone as beloved as Rob Reiner, and then it's combined with the fact that he and his wife were stabbed to death and it was their own son. Oh, this will be talked about for a long time to come. And I'm sure there are going to be books about it, documentaries. There's going to be a special on ABC tomorrow night, 10 p.m. Pacific time. I don't know what for the rest of the country, and of course, I hope it'll also be about honoring Rob Reiner, because one of the things, if any of you have been watching the news today, they have been celebrating his life as his life should be. His life is, even I had to take stock at how much he accomplished in his life. I'm old enough to remember watching him on All in the Family when it first was broadcast. In fact, My mother and I watched the very first ever broadcast of All in the Family. I will never forget that night because CBS had to put a disclaimer at the beginning of the show, and I don't remember what it said, but it was basically a warning. Uh, there's going to be language in this and mature subject matter, something to that effect. I don't remember what it was, but it was definitely a disclaimer beforehand. And of course, that had my mother and myself like, "Oh, what's this going to be?" I was just a little kid at the time, and I remember how shocking it was. There never had really been anything like that ever before on television. Like All in the Family was quite groundbreaking. But, watching his life, being celebrated on the news, all the beautiful things being said about him, it was just a reminder if the man had done nothing else in his life, just being Archie Bunker's son-in-law, Mike Stivic, meathead, that alone would have given him a substantial legacy. He won 2 Emmy Awards for the role. Um, I remember many years ago, Rob Reiner joked about this. He said, "Oh, they're probably gonna put meathead on my tombstone." I guess we'll find out about that one, but, he did have a sense of humor and a great sense of awareness about that. Um, well, someone's asking, what are some of the causes of Hollywood scandals? Well, that would be like a 5 or 6 hour show. If I go into there, maybe I can touch on it a little bit later. I mean, there are so many, many scandals, going back to the 19 teens and 20s. I don't want to get off track just yet because I want to focus on Rob Reiner. But one of the things that comes to mind, there's a fabulous book called A Cast of Killers. And it was about one of the earliest Hollywood scandals that involved this was a murder that took place, I think, in 1923, and it involved a very highly esteemed silent film director named William Desmond Taylor, and it involved two of the biggest female stars of the day, Mabel Normand, who was, a great, great comedian. Some called her the female Charlie Chaplin. And then there was a beautiful, beautiful blonde ingenue named Mary Miles Minter. And they were both, there was this big mystery as to who killed William Desmond Taylor. And both actresses were implicated. And then it turned out Mary Miles Minter's mother was also a possible suspect. Anyway, William Desmond Taylor was murdered, and Mary Miles Minter and Mabel Normand had their careers destroyed by this scandal. It was pretty bad. That's one of the earliest scandals I can think of. But you could go back to silent film, the comedian Fatty Arbuckle, who was very, very big in his day, like the late 19 teens and 20s, early 20s. And there've been, I think there was a movie and there was also a Broadway musical, The Wild Party, based on it. Supposedly it was this outrageous drunken party and orgies were taking place. And a lovely young starlet, I think her name was Virginia Rapp was her name. She was brutally raped and murdered, and somehow Fatty Arbuckle, and he was later found innocent in court. He was fully cleared, but I guess because he was the one big star at the party, somehow it got linked to him. He had his career destroyed also because of the scandal. So you can go on. Oh God, I could do a whole series of shows just on Hollywood scandals. But anyway, to get back to Rob Reiner, this will certainly be in there. I'm sure this is going to be talked about for a long time to come. But I was just saying that as his life was being celebrated, it was just so clear if he had done nothing but All in the Family, that alone would have made him legendary. But he reinvented himself. I remember seeing an interview with Sally Struthers. She did it just a few months ago, and she said that he was always, when they were working together in the show, he was always planning other things. He was very inventive. He was always uh, writing, coming up with concepts. And there was this one day he came into, I think, at the table read, and he put a book down in front of her. And he said, "I'm going to make this into a movie one day." And the book was The Princess Bride. He went on to be a celebrated screenwriter, a very celebrated director. It was kind of like when Diane Keaton died recently. I was surprised when I started hearing a whole list of her movies, how many great, great movies she had made that I just loved without even thinking about it. I realized that Diane Keaton's death, that I was actually a big fan of hers without quite knowing that I was a big Diane Keaton fan all along. Well, Rob Reiner, they started mentioning Princess Bride, Spinal Tap, Misery, A Few Good Men. I can go on to think about titles, but I didn't quite put together what a prolific film director he was. So again, he could have been legendary for that alone, and they were pointing out on the local news, this is a man who had a 6-decade career that touched multiple generations, and we've certainly been seeing the incredible outpouring of love for him today. I don't think we realize just how loved he was, but I I was mentioning this to some of my friends, and also my dear friend Dr. Whimsy, whom I do the 2 shows with a week, that people who play television characters, long-running television characters, especially on shows that become iconic, those people become our collective family. They truly do. When you think of it, and you've got somebody, maybe it sounds a little cliche to say this, but you've got somebody you're welcoming into your living room every week, week after week, year after year. And you feel like you know these people. You feel like you know them intimately, at least through their character. And that can be a mixed bag. I was reading an old interview with Frances Bavier the other day, played Aunt B on Andy Griffith's show. It was the anniversary of her birthday, so that's probably why the interview came up. But she was talking about how very hard it was, at least for her, to disappear into a character, meaning people forgot this was a character on a TV show. It wasn't who Frances Bavier really was in real life. She considered herself a serious actress, and she lamented the fact that her own identity with the public had been lost, and everybody just thought of her as Aunt B, and she considered that a bit of a curse. Though I've also had the fortune living here in LA for so many years of talking with people who played the iconic characters on shows who have embraced it. And I can, oh my God, how many I've met over the years, like Don Knotts, Andy Griffith, um, oh God, I'm blanking out. I'm thinking of like Natalie Schaefer, who played Mrs. Howell on Gilligan's Island. I loved her. I ran into her in a store in Beverly Hills back in the late 80s. She was so sweet to me. She must have spent half an hour talking to me. All my inane questions about Gilligan's Island. She was delighted to just answer everything and talk to me. And you realize people like her, our family. I later went on. I have met all 3 of the women from Gilligan's Island, by the way. I went on to, in my work in the nutrition industry, I put together a vitamin program for Tina Louise, who played Ginger. Spent about an hour with her. And then finally, it was a few years later, I saw that Dawn Wells was going to be doing a book signing. And I thought, well, I got to go. I've got to go complete my set. I've gotta meet her so I can always say to my dying day, "I met all the women from Gilligan's Island." And when I approached her, I told her that. I said, "I've now completed my set." And she laughed so hard. She thought that was the sweetest thing. And the reason I bring that up is because she was someone who totally embraced the fact that she was known for this television character for playing Mary Ann. She was under no delusions, "Oh, I could have had this bigger career. Oh, I could have been this serious actress. Oh, I could have been in the movies." Kind of like Tina Louise, who has not been so gracious about her character, but Don Wells fully embraced it. Don Knotts, I think he fully embraced it. I'm trying to think others I can talk to. Um, oh, hi, Oracle of Whimsy. Whimsy, thank you for joining. Yeah, just these, all these people, Whimsy, you're like me. You've met a lot of great Hollywood stars too. We worked together, you know, here in LA and specifically in West Hollywood. There wasn't a day we didn't have a big star come in. But, I think for myself, and I've met major A-list stars in my time, but I think the ones I've always gotten the biggest kick out of have been the people who played television characters in my childhood. Like I said, meeting the three women from Gilligan's Island, meeting Barbara Eden, meeting Don Knotts, meeting Andy Griffith, Carol Burnett, my all-time idol. Met her 3 times. Got to see Lucille Ball film an episode of a TV show. I didn't get to meet her face to face, but I did get to see her in person. Phyllis Diller, Bob Hope, Buddy Hack. I'm going on and on. All these people used to be on TV shows when I was a kid. And that was just, to me, that was just the greatest thing. And I even said to my sister, it's kind of like Alice through the looking glass, the mirror. Only in my case, it was the television screen. As a kid, I was on one side of the television screen, and then flash forward all these years later, I'm on the other side of the TV screen, actually meeting these people face to face and getting to tell them what they meant to me. And that's one of the reasons why sometimes after even 40 years in Los Angeles, I still feel like a kid in a candy store being here. I've never become jaded to it. I should check my comments here. Let's see. Joyce is here. Indeed. Whimsy came to join. Let's see here. Oh, people saying hello to each other. um, let's see. Oh, I wish I had it here beside me right now. Barbara Eden, when I met her 3 years ago, she was 91 years old at the time. She's 94 now. Looks incredible. And I bought a replica genie bottle. There's a man here in the city who makes them, and they look just like the real thing. I got Barbara Eden to sign it for me with a Sharpie marker. She wrote Barbara Eden, and then she signed Genie underneath it. And so, I mean, it's just so cool knowing that she held that bottle in her hands and personalized it. And of course, speaking of longevity, our beloved Dick Van Dyke just turned 100 years old 2 days ago. God bless him. What a great man. And he is someone that, hey, Chris, thanks for joining. Dick Van Dyke, I did get the pleasure of meeting. What was it, Andy? About the lady who played Granny Clampett. That was Irene Ryan. No, I'm sorry to say I never met her. She died, I think, back in 1972 or 73, many years before I ever moved out to Los Angeles. But she was a splendid character actress, really good. And it's always fun, like on YouTube, you can find some of Irene Ryan's appearances. She did a lot of game shows like Password. You get to see her as herself, without all that granny wig and the makeup and everything, where she was just being herself. And she was actually a attractive, very refined older lady. She was just a good actress, found the role of a lifetime. Um, but what was this here? But she did accept the role or was she like Tina Louise? Oh, no, I think Irene Ryan, the best of my knowledge, embraced the character. I think she loved what she was doing. I don't think she was quite like Tina Louise. But anyway, I was going to say about Dick Van Dyke. I had the great privilege, and I do mean the privilege of meeting him. Let's see, this was back in 2011, and it was when his autobiography was coming out, and he was going to do a signing of the book at the Barnes and Noble bookstore here at the Grove Shopping Mall here in Los Angeles. And those of you outside of Los Angeles, the Grove is a really big deal. It was built right next to the old farmers market, which is right next to the CBS headquarters, where they, interestingly enough, used to videotape All in the Family, the Carol Burnett show, the Judy Garland show, the Danny Kaye show, Red Skelton. The building has been sold, and the fate of it is not known, but for many years, that's where the CBS headquarters were. I even had a meeting. I had a meeting once at CBS with one of the vice presidents of marketing, and it was when my friend Bart Andrews and I were trying to sell our book about I Love Lucy, and we wanted to get licensing from CBS for this. So we had a 3-hour meeting there, and that's something I'm actually quite proud of. You know, I'm very proud. My dear friend Bart had suffered several strokes, and it was difficult for him to communicate. So he came along with me to the meeting, but he more or less implied that I was going to be conducting the meeting. I was like, "Oh no, Bart, you're going to be here too." No, dear Bart stayed quiet, and I ended up conducting the 3-hour meeting with the CBS vice president. And I was so in the moment, and I had so much to focus on, but it went really, really well. We thought at the time our chances were good for the book. We didn't know the obstacles we were going to be facing from, I'll just say it, Lucy Arnaz. Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz's daughter had a lot to do with blocking the book. She had a lot to do with it, but that's a whole other story. But CBS was all for the book. It was a very successful meeting. We even had a conference call with Chicago with the licensing people. And anyway, that's my little story. I had a meeting at CBS once many years ago. But the Dick Van Dyke, what was I going to say? Yeah, this was at the Grove at the Barnes and Noble, and he was going to do a book signing for his autobiography. And I got there, and there was only they were giving out bracelets. He was only going to sign for 200 people. Well, I got there like just a few minutes too late, so I didn't get a bracelet. I was like, bummer, bummer, and I was walking out, and as I was about to go out the door, I saw my friend Michael Stern, good friend Michael Stern, who was actually very close to Lucille Ball. In fact, he even calls himself Lucy's number one fan. And I'll just sidetrack for a moment there. He has license plates that say number one Lucy fan, which is really cute. But anyway, we ran into each other, and he goes, "Chuck, what are you doing here?" And I said, "Oh, I was here to see Dick Van Dyke and get my book signed, but I got here too late." And he said, "Oh, don't worry about it. I'm on my way up to the green room to visit him right now. In fact, Rosemary is almost coming. She's going to be here soon. We'll all go up together. You can come with me and meet him that way." Which, that was unexpected. And it was just like 2 minutes later, some people arrived with Rosemary. She was in a wheelchair at the time. Sweet, sweet lady. So my Hollywood life, this is where sometimes it does feel like a movie. I pushed Rosemary's wheelchair beside Michael Stern, and we came to the elevator. I pushed the button. We went up to the second floor, and we went down a little hallway, and there was a door. And here I am behind Rosemary, and she knocks on the door, and guess who answers it? Dick Van Dyke. And he sees Rosemary, and he saw Rosemary, and he was so excited. He goes, "Rosie, Rosie, oh, how nice of you to surprise me. And so Dick was a little oblivious to myself and Michael and the other people. He was just so focused on Rosemary. And of course, I pushed her wheelchair into the room and I was standing there, and it was a small room. So there wasn't really any place for me to go other than to stand behind Rosemary. And so the two of them are having this very private conversation. And I'm like, I shouldn't be standing here. I felt like I was violating them, but I couldn't help it. And I guess it's okay to say this. They were talking about Mary Tyler Moore. And Dick had just done the Rachel Ray show 2 days earlier, promoting his autobiography. And Mary Tyler Moore came on as a surprise guest for him. And I know this was a private conversation, but I think it's okay to tell this. It's not bad. But um, Dick was, he was excited to see Rosemary. And then he got a little teary-eyed. And he said, he called her Rosie. He said, Rosie, I saw Mary 2 days ago. We were doing the Rachel Ray show, and it's not good. She's almost blind. She's having trouble hearing, and she can barely stand and walk. I don't think she's going to be around much longer. Anyway, I was standing there listening to the two of them talking about Mary Tyler Moore, and it was out of concern. And then, well, what do I say to Dick Van Dyke? And the one thing I could think of to say to him, once everything was settled and all, was the first movie I ever saw in my life was Mary Poppins. The very first movie I ever went to a movie theater to see was Mary Poppins. I was a little kid. And I told him that. I said, you were in the first movie I ever saw. And he's like, oh, yeah. He seemed happy about that. Nice. And I gave him my book to sign. And then I wanted to be gracious and let him talk with the others. I didn't want to monopolize his time. But I got Rosemary to sign the book also. And also Larry Matthews, who played Richie, their little boy on the show. He was there in the room. So he signed my book also, which made the autobiography extra special. But to have that private meeting with him is something I will cherish forever. In fact, I should have thought before the show, because I've got a photograph. I don't know if I can find it on here quickly enough. Hold on. I should have thought of this beforehand. I apologize. It might be on here. I'm looking on my iPad. If I don't find it, I'll give up on this, but I wanted to show this. Yes, okay, I found it. That's the picture I took. I took this picture. I'm sorry, I'm trying to hold this up and not get glare on the iPad. I took this picture. That's Michael Stern in the upper left corner. And then, of course, there's Dick Van Dyke, Rosemary, and Larry Matthews, who's not Little Richie anymore. And the really dumb thing? I didn't think to hand my phone to someone else so I could have gotten in the picture with them. I didn't think at the time because I was so in the moment at the time. But anyway, that's the picture I took on that day in the green room of them. And I see Dick Van Dyke. I see he was 86 at the time, and just a very sweet, lovely man. He was everything that you would hope for him to be. He was. So anyway, I am so happy for him. He made it to his 100th birthday. I was a little afraid he was going to be like Betty White. Remember, she died 2 weeks before her 100th birthday, but he made it. I mean, I remember even sitting here at the stroke of midnight thinking, he made it. He did it. He's 100 years old. A very good friend of mine, my friend Dave, who used to be an animator at Disney. He worked on a number of films like Aladdin, Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast. He's good friends with Arlene Silver, Dick Van Dyke's wife. his lovely wife, and they have close to a 50-year age difference, or I think it's a 46-year age difference. And my friend Dave said they are so in love with each other and they take such delight in each other's company. And he said that he believes Arlene has a lot to do with why Dick Van Dyke made it to 100 and why he's still so healthy and he takes good care of himself. And it's a lot of it's to do because she takes very good care of him. And when I've seen interviews, it's so clear he is the love of her life. She's the love of his life. And it's just really happy to see two apparent soulmates together like that. And I saw some video of Dick Van Dyke's 100th birthday party. It was a very low key affair. He didn't want to do a whole lot. Come on, he's 100 years old, but they had it at home, just few friends and family. And the wonderful musician John Batiste was there and played the piano and played a lot of Dick Van Dyke's songs associated with him, like Chim Chim Cheree, songs from Bye Bye Birdie. It's amazing how many things are associated with Dick Van Dyke. And it just reinforced the fact that he's a beloved legend. And I have this feeling he's going to be around for a few more years. I think so. It's not unusual. Olivia de Havilland made it to 103. Um, Louise Reiner, who won 2 Oscars, Best Actress Oscars back in the 1930s, she lived to be 104. We hear stories of people making it 106, 107, beyond. I just have a feeling Dick Van Dyke's going to be around for a while longer. He seems to be loving life too much to go away just yet. He's even said that. There was a thing in People magazine. He said, you know what? 100 years, it's not enough. Not enough. So we'll see what happens. And yeah, Whimsy, it is so sad about Rob Reiner. I was talking about him earlier on the show. But I have more to say about Rob Reiner because I can personalize this a bit. I think it was Andy was asking me if I'd ever met Rob or knew him, which I did not. I mentioned All in the Family. The only one I ever met was Sally Struthers. And then I saw Gene Stapleton on stage in a one-woman show. But yeah, what a great performer. But anyway, 2 of my friends did know Rob Reiner, or at least they knew him in the capacity where they worked for him. One friend, she used to do massage therapy for Rob Reiner, and she told me that he was just a lovely, sweet, down to earth man, and for her it was especially special because she grew up with All in the Family. But another friend of mine, he used to do catering work about 20 years ago, and he and some others catered a party for Carl Reiner and the family. It was an Oscar night party, and it was held at Carl Reiner's house. And my friend got to meet Carl Reiner, his wonderful wife, who was in Harry Met Sally, Rob Reiner's film that he directed. It's the wonderful scene, the orgasm scene. Meg Ryan and Billy Crystal in the delicatessen, and Meg Ryan's going, yes, yes, yeah, the scene. I don't want to act it out here. I could, but I won't. And then it cuts away to this older woman and goes, I'll have what she's having. Well, that was Rob Reiner's mother, Carl Reiner's wife. And anyway, Rob Reiner was there. His wife was there. And my friend said they were just the most wonderful, completely unpretentious, down to earth, regular people. They were watching the Oscars together, but they were rich enough to have it catered. But that's as far as the pretense went. They invited the caterers just after they were done serving. Hey, sit down with us, eat with us. Come on, watch the Oscars with us. They were like that. And let's see. One of the things it was the caterers had provided these little chocolate Oscars that were covered in gold. I think it was edible gold, some sort of gold frosting or something. And Carl Reiner was like, "Are you sure it's safe to eat these? If I eat this, am I going to end up in the hospital?" To assure them that yes, it was okay to eat the little gold chocolate Oscars. And just to give you an idea of how down to earth Rob Reiner was, um, he had a little bit of a headache, and no, my friend had a little bit of a headache, and he said, "Would you please excuse me? I just need to go out to my car to get some aspirin." And Rob goes, "Oh, come on with me. Come on. We'll go in the bathroom. I've got aspirin." They went in there, and Rob's there, opens up the medicine chest, and there's Tylenol and Excedrin and aspirin. "What do you want?" And he gave him some, and he said, "Oh, here, take 2 more. You may need more later." And it's like, that's who Rob Reiner was, just a sweet, down to earth guy. And my friend was excited because he got to be at an Oscar party with Alan Brady and Meathead. Let's see, where's some other comments here. Oh, yes, of course, Kirk Douglas. I should have thought of that. He lived to make to 103. Uh, let's see. Bob Hope made it to 100, of course. Norman Lear made it to 101. Dolores Hope, 102. Yeah, and I pointed that out about Olivia de Havilland making it to 103. And also the woman who was Judy Garland's stand-in for Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, she's still alive. She's 105. She might be about to turn 106 now. She's still around. Interesting little piece of trivia with her. She is seen in the movie in a couple of crucial scenes. The scene where it's in the black and white Kansas sequence where she's on top of the fence post and she's walking and she falls into the pig pen. And anyway, MGM didn't, they were very protective of their stars, especially, if the star of the movie got injured, that would hold up production. So that's often a reason for using stand-ins. You let the stand-ins get hurt, not the star. So anyway, I can't think of her name, but they had her do that stunt. They have her filmed from the back, but it's her walking on the fence. And when I bring that up, am I the only person who used to wonder about this? I know when I was a little kid, yes, I know this was all a film set and a movie, and yes, I get that. But when I was a kid, I used to wonder, when she fell into the pigsty and they lift her up, shouldn't she have been covered in mud and pig manure, everything? They pull her Dorothy up, and she doesn't have so much as a spot of dust on her immaculately pressed dress. The magic of Hollywood. So I used to wonder about that. But the other moment where they use the stand-in, it's the amazing transition scene from black and white to color. And every time I watch this, I just realized what a miraculous thing it was, because this was decades before CGI existed. Today it'd be a very easy thing to do this. No, in 1939, they had to actually do the special effect in camera. They actually had to do it physically. So the way it was done, and what really helped to make this more apparent, it was only in latter years they restored the original sepia tone to the black and white sequence. For many years we would just see black and white, so it didn't seem quite so miraculous when it went from black and white to color. But when it was in sepia, then you could appreciate the detail that went into this, because that, the moment where it's black and white and Dorothy is walking down the hallway, and then it cuts to the part where she goes to the door and opens it up. That's where they had to switch to Technicolor. But what they did, they painted the whole set in sepia tone colors. And even the stand-in, Dorothy's stand-in for this sequence, they had to put makeup on her, the dress, the wig, everything, to give the illusion that she was in black and white sepia tone. So that's how they did it. they have it the sepia tone, which matches seamlessly with the other sequence, and she goes to the door and opens it up, and then, of course, you see Technicolor Oz through the doorway, and that's where Judy Garland, in her blue Technicolor dress, walked at the stand-in went to the door, opened it, and then Judy Garland walked through the actual doorway into Oz, and that's how they did it. It was ingenious because I have played that scene over and over again, utterly seamless, utterly believable, and it's so amazing that they did all that in camera. So anyway, that's the story about Judy Garland's stand-in, and I don't know where else they used her in the movie. I'm sure anything that was remotely dangerous, the poor stand-in had to do it. But she's 105 now. But yeah, let's see. Danny, you're saying that's where I remember Rob Reiner most. I think most people will always remember him as Meathead. That was even he acknowledged that his character was Meathead. And I said earlier in the show that Rob Reiner used to joke about this, about how that was going to be carved on his tombstone, Meathead. So we'll wait and see if that's going to happen. Let's see. I'm looking at some other comments here. All in the Family holds up beautifully. I used to think if ever there was going to be a show that was going to be ruined because it would be too dated, it would be that show, because they did so many topical things on there. But here it is, more than 50 years later, and you watch the reruns and you realize that the heart of that show was more of a human interest sitcom. That was at the heart of the whole thing, and that's why the show remains timeless. And I'm remembering now, I once had dinner with Bob Schiller, who was one of the writers on the show. Excuse me here. I'm trying not to choke this time when I sip. This was, remember this now, this was 2001. And it was back in the days when I used to go to the I Love Lucy conventions in Burbank. For 6 years, they had one every year in the late 90s, right up until the year of the 50th anniversary in 2001. And then they stopped because they knew they couldn't sustain this. It was just a finite amount of time left before most of these people were going to be dead. But thankfully, a lot of people were still alive at the time. And Bob Schiller and his partner, Bob Weisskopf, joined the writing team of I Love Lucy in the later seasons. And they also worked on the hour-long episodes. So that's why he was there. And they had a big dinner event. And that was special for me because to my left was Wanda Clark, who was Lucille Ball's personal secretary. Lovely, delightful lady with great stories to tell. So I had her on one side of me, and I had Bob Schiller on the other side of me. And Bob was the most wonderful conversationalist. And thankfully, because I knew my show business history, I knew that he and the two Bobs, aside from I Love Lucy, had written for All in the Family, and they also wrote for Maude. And so there was just plenty for me to talk about and ask him. And one of my comments to him was that All in the Family always felt to me more like theater than a sitcom. It was more like a stage play. And he lit up and he said, "Thank you for saying that. That is exactly what we were aiming for. We were treating All in the Family as theater." So I'm thrilled that you noticed that, and I hope others notice that too. That's what we were always aiming for. And he was telling me stories like the episode in the eighth season where this man tried to rape Edith Bunker. It was one of the most profound episodes they ever did. It was an hour-long show. Jean Stapleton won an Emmy for it. It was an unbelievable performance on her part. It was where they let Edith get very dramatic, and she escaped but she was almost raped by this man. And you watch the show when she is running away from him. She has a hot cake in the oven, and he's starting to unbutton the back of her dress, and she thinks quickly. There's a hot cake pan in the oven, and she takes it and shoves it in his face and burns him. And she runs for her life out the door, and the studio audience was just going crazy. Bob told me that the audience bleachers he said he thought they were going to break apart. People were stamping and cheering, run, run, Edith, run, run. The audience was so into it. And he told me that the actor, oh, I'm trying to think of his name, wonderful, wonderful actor. David Dukes, I think was his name. Wonderful man, wonderful man. But he was an actor and he was playing a character. Well, he got death threats after that. And also, he had work lined up. People were canceling his contract, saying, "Oh, we can't hire you. There's too much notoriety around you. People hate you so much now because you're the man who tried to attack Edith Bunker." It was really bad. And it was so unfair to the actor. And Gene Stapleton felt very bad about this. So this was like a few weeks later. She asked him if he would please come back. And it was at the beginning of the taping of the show. She brought him out and held his hand and said, "Folks, I want you to know this is a wonderful actor. He's an actor. He played a character. He's a good man." I mean, I forget what she said. I'm paraphrasing it, but she praised him, and that made the press. And thankfully, he started working again, and it saved his career. But that just shows how beloved the Edith Bunker character was. That anybody would dare to hurt her. People took that personally. And like I said earlier in the show about how television characters become our family, where we really believe them. And All in the Family was so well written and it was so impeccably acted that people believed those characters. And I think Gene Stapleton was saying once that Carol O'Connor used to get some really vicious hate mail because people thought he was Archie Bunker, thought he was this horrible, bigoted man. And he was anything but that. Real life, Carol O'Connor was a liberal. He was a liberal, and he was a very gracious man. He did a lot of work for civil rights and charities, but that was his character. So people believed it. And I think that's one of the reasons why people are reacting so emotionally to Rob Reiner right now, because it's not just like Rob Reiner died. It's like Mike Stivic Meta died also. I think it's almost literally like that. People take them so to heart. Yeah. Oh, somebody was mentioning Charlie Lane. Yeah, he lived to be 102 himself. And he was one of those character actors who just appeared everywhere. In fact, he was on the first season of the Lucy show, Lucille Ball's show after I Love Lucy. And he played the banker who was in charge of her trust fund, Mr. Barnsdale or something like that. I forget what his name was, but as I understand it, he got fired from the show because he had trouble remembering his lines. And Lucy was a real taskmaster. She was very strict about professionalism on the set, and she expected people to be on the top of their game. So she had no patience for people who did not know their lines. Especially when you're filming, because that means having to do retakes, and that costs money. And Lucille Ball was the president of the studio, and she owned the show, so it was her money. So anyway, that's what happened. And he was replaced the next year with the marvelous, marvelous Gail Gordon, Mr. Mooney. And he was with Lucy through the remainder of the Lucy show. And Here's Lucy. And then later did her final series, Life with Lucy. And that's the one I sat in the studio audience for. And I'll tell you an interesting piece of trivia about Lucille Ball and Gail Gordon. Their working relationship went all the way back to 1938 in radio. Lucy's very first radio show was a show with Jack Haley, who played the Tin Man in The Wizard of Oz. Um, Gail Gordon and Lucille Ball were both on that show. And then 10 years later, Lucille Ball did a radio show called My Favorite Husband. This was in 1948. Gail Gordon again co-starred with her on that, along with B. Benaderet and Richard Denning. And then My Favorite Husband was the basis for I Love Lucy, of course, with one very big tweak, a major tweak. The all-American, blonde, blue-eyed banker husband was replaced by the Cuban band leader, Desi Arnaz. And, well, we know where that went. It went very well. And, of course, Lucy wanted Gail Gordon and B. Benaderet to be Fred and Ethel Mertz, but B. Benaderet was committed to working on the Burns and Allen show. And let's see, Gail Gordon was committed to doing Our Miss Brooks with Eve Garden. But he did appear on 2 episodes of I Love Lucy and one of the hour-long episodes. So Gail Gordon is the one actor who appeared on every single broadcast show Lucille Ball ever did. They had a working relationship that lasted, I believe, 48 years. So it was just incredible. And of course, Lucy adored him. Let's see here. Where are some other comments here? Forgive me. I haven't been checking these. I mentioned Charles Lane there. I mentioned him too. The TV Land Awards, yeah, that's whatever became of that. Oh yeah, thank you. Bobby Cochet was Judy Garland's stand-in. I understand they were friends. And also, a lot of people are surprised to know that Margaret Hamilton, who played the witch, she and Judy Garland in real life had a close friendship. In fact, Judy found Margaret Hamilton to be very motherly and nurturing to her. Talk about the antithesis of the relationship they had on screen. Yeah. Yeah. So W has a comment here about how brilliantly written and acted All in the Family was. Yeah, well, yeah, Andy, it's just you were talking about some don't believe it's just a TV show or it's just a movie. Well, I think that's when you've got really good actors, you've got the writing to back them up. A really good actor can transport you and make you believe. Lucille Ball said that was the secret to her performing. She called herself a child believer, meaning she believed everything just like a little child would believe, like a child play acting or in an imaginary world or with imaginary friends. That was her approach to playing Lucy Ricardo. And she said, if I believed it, I can make you believe it. And Lucille Ball said her great inspiration was a monologist named Julius Tannen. And he used to tour the vaudeville circuit. He was also, he had a little role in Singing in the Rain, very tiny little role in that. But he toured the nation on the vaudeville circuit. And Lucy said when she was a little girl in Jamestown, the Jamestown Theater, sometimes he'd be there and she loved to watch him. And when she was like 8, 9 years old, she was fascinated by how this man could just be on a bare stage with nothing but a light bulb over his head and sitting on a stool, and he would talk and he would transport you. Much like it is when we're reading a really good book, how it transports us and our imagination takes over and we start seeing it for ourselves and feeling and experiencing it. She said that was the magic of Julian Tannen when he would talk on a bare stage. And it lit a fire in little Lucille Ball. And she said, I'm going to do that too someday. And that's what she did. Well, in a way, that's what Rob Reiner and Sally Struthers and Gene Stapleton and Carol O'Connor did. Um, I saw I haven't seen a public statement yet from Sally Struthers. And I think we're all waiting to hear what she has to say. But she gave an interview on one of the YouTube channels. I think it was like 6 months ago. And she was very frank in this interview. She talked about a lot of things that she didn't feel she could have said before, like Norman Lear. Norman Lear had just recently passed away, and at the age of 101. And Sally Struthers said, well, now that Norman is dead, I feel it's safe for me to say this. He did not create All in the Family. Carol O'Connor created the show. It was his idea. It was all his concept. He's the one who put it all together. Norman Lear took the producer credit for it. But she said, I feel safe in saying now it was Carol O'Connor. I mean, yeah, Carol O'Connor. But then she was asked about Rob Reiner. And she, had nice things to say about him, about when they were working on the show together. Like I told earlier about how he put a book in front of her one day at the table read, The Princess Bride, and said, I am going to make this into a movie someday. She said she knew how extraordinary he was, his mind, his inventiveness, even his background with Carl Reiner. And she loved working with him. She said he was just an incredible partner. A lot of people may not know this, but his wife at the time, Penny Marshall, almost was cast as Gloria. It was between her and Sally Struthers, and Sally won out. And of course, it ended up being Sally's big break. And then, at the time, Penny Marshall, I think, was doing The Odd Couple with Jack Klugman and Tony Randall. And then she went on to Laverne and Shirley, which people have forgotten, but for several seasons was the #1 show on the air. So Rob Reiner, All in the Family was #1 for like 5 years. And then right after that, Laverne and Shirley was #1 for about 5 years. So that was a married couple. They both had #1 television shows. But anyway, she almost played Gloria, didn't get cast, but it worked out. Sally was clearly meant for that role. So she loved working with him. And the interviewer said, well, were you two good friends? And Sally said, I thought we were good friends. I really thought we were good friends. And she was telling a story of how it was many years later. It was a play at the Pantages Theater in Hollywood. And she was coming out and she saw Rob Reiner and his wife, Michelle. And she goes, Robbie. I guess that's what she called him. Robbie, it's me, Sally. And she ran to him to give him a hug. And she said he was so cold to her, like barely acknowledging her. And she was really hurt by that. And she didn't know if it was because he worried that Michelle would think they had been having an affair or something while doing the show, and he still had a thing for her or something. But she speculated maybe it's because he was with his wife and that's why he was acting that way. But she said it hurt her feelings, and she said she could never really think of him the same way after that, having always thought they were friends. And I remember this was 3 years ago on the Emmy Awards. They were doing a little tribute to All in the Family. Well, it might have been longer because I think it was, if I recall now, it was the 50th anniversary. So that would have been around 2001, 2002. But what was really strange, they didn't stand together on stage. They had a recreation of the All in the Family set. They both came out. Sally stood on one far end of the stage. Rob stood on the far end of the other stage. I thought, this is really weird. Really weird. I mean, it was like this literal distance between them. And it's also interesting, as of right now, 6:37 p.m. West Coast time, there still has not been a statement from Sally Struthers. I'm sure she'll come out with something soon, but I think she's really having to think about what to say, especially since she went on public record not too long ago telling that story about the distance between them. Um, something back when um, these reboots were popular, we saw Will and Grace get rebooted, Roseanne, which turned into The Conners. They tried to do a reboot of Murphy Brown, Mad About You. Most of them didn't do that well. But I always thought it would have been a great reboot of All in the Family. To have yes, I'm aware Mike and Gloria divorced on the show and all that. Well, they could have done a few tweaks with the writing and said that Mike and Gloria got back together again. But I thought it would have been a really interesting reboot to have Rob Reiner and Sally Struthers come back as Mike and Gloria in their senior years, and maybe have something where Gloria inherited the house from her mother and father, and they moved back into the house again or something. I thought that would have been a great premise. And Norman Lear was still living. He could have even produced it again, but it just never came up. I don't think they wanted to work together again, apparently. Um, anyway, that was just my little notion. Let's see some other comments here. Oh, yeah, Andy brought up something here, Bruce Dern, there was a movie where he killed John Wayne in the film, and he got death threats from it. Yeah, yeah, and I've heard plenty of stories of, soap operas, people who play villains. There are plenty of villains on soap operas where, people think they are real. There was one story of an actress, she said she was in a grocery store, and this woman came up, opened up a carton of milk and poured it over her head and said, "That's for doing that to so and so." You know, um, there was some actress. I think it was the actress who played Cora Beth on The Waltons, Ronnie Claire Edwards. Her character was rather unlikable. And she was saying, I saw her giving a speech or something at a Waltons reunion. And she said, "You wouldn't believe to this day how many people I get coming up to me. I hate you. I hate you. I think you're horrible. I just hate you." And Ronnie Claire said, "Well, let me tell you, to an actor, those words are compliments." Meaning that's saying you've done your job really well, that people take you to heart like that. Um, oh yeah, mention here, Gail Gordon definitely had a voice for radio. Oh yeah, he did a lot of radio shows in the 30s and 40s. Definitely. That's where he initially started his career. In fact, the show he did with Lucille Ball with Jack Haley, he was the announcer on the show, but they would do skits together. So it was the earliest time that he and Lucy worked together. And it was Lucy and Mr. Mooney and the Tin Man. And what was it saying? Yeah, they killed off Roseanne and brought in the lady who played Peg Bundy, Katie Seagal. Well, that what happened there, originally it was a full-fledged reboot of Roseanne, and Roseanne Barr is notorious for shooting off her mouth. Very outspoken woman, and she made some comments that were construed to be highly racist. Now, Roseanne denied this, and she claimed that the cast and the producers of the show were trying to frame her to get her off the show and take it over. I don't know what the truth is, but Roseanne did make some comments that got her into a lot of trouble, and she was fired from the show, and the show was almost canceled altogether. And she, even though she owned the rights to the show, she signed some waiver or something, or she got paid off. I don't know what the story is, where she allowed the other actors to continue with the format, and hence Roseanne turned into The Conners. And that was one of the few reboots that actually lasted a few seasons. It just finished up last year. But I thought it was a shame because it was just never the same without Roseanne. Never. I know, Roseanne Barr was a difficult woman, probably still is a difficult woman. Um, back in the 90s, back when the show Roseanne was the number one show on the air. It was a major, major hit. And Roseanne went from a nothing stand-up comedian to just this overnight superstar. And I know how poor she was because a man who used to cut my hair used to cut her hair and her children's hair. And she would say, "Well, can you give me a discount if I bring in all four or all of my kids?" I think she had four kids. She said, "If I bring in all four kids, will you give me a bulk discount on haircuts?" I mean, that's where she was. She just wasn't, she came from very humble beginnings, but she became nouveau rich and she became powerful. And unfortunately, she also became a mean, very mean woman. There were awful, awful stories about her here in Hollywood. This was when I used to, I was working with Bart Andrews. I knew him quite well, and he had a lot of celebrity friends and people in the industry who would just come back with these nightmare stories about how abusive she was to the cast and crew and the writers and the producers. Real egomaniac of a woman. So I almost wonder if when the show came back many years later, if this was like revenge time on her, like people wanted to get back at her for all the horrible things she had done 30 years before, I can't say. Oh, hi, Ward. Thank you for joining. Don't worry about being late. I'm just happy to have you here. Um, oh, yeah, Andy. Yeah, she caught a lot of flack that time she sang the national anthem. And hate to say it, but deservedly so. It was awful. It was, she was out there screeching and not even making an attempt to sing. And it was almost like she was mocking the national anthem, and yeah, it's on YouTube. You can make your own judgment there, but no, it did not go over well at all. Let's see here. Was it sad for Sally? Maybe he had a lot on his mind. Yeah, it's possible because Sally said he was very preoccupied, but I looked it up again today, and she she said that there was she said she and Rob Reiner never had an affair. It was very professional, but there was that speculation because they were so believable as a married couple. They were just good actors, but I think Sally said Penny Marshall was suspicious of the two of them, thought they were having an affair, and apparently, according to Sally, the Michelle was suspicious also. So that could have been why he was so cold and distant to her when she showed up when he was next to his wife. But maybe Sally will talk about it further. Yeah. Um, or by the way, we celebrated Mama's 98th birthday not too long ago. Well, congratulations and happy birthday to your mother. That's wonderful. That's really wonderful. Let's see, people saying hello to each other again in the comments. Let's see here. Let's see here. There was a baby Joey Stivic doll. Yes, there was. And it was controversial. What else would it have been? It was anatomically correct. It was an anatomically correct little boy doll. And I don't know how well it sold. I would imagine those dolls are collector's pieces on eBay, probably bringing a lot of money if you still got it in the original box, because I think the box even said Archie Bunker's grandson on it. Ward, I forgot how Miss Barr treated Miss Julia Louise Dreyfus. I don't know the story there, but I'm imagining it wasn't kind. Um, you got me thinking about Lucille Ball and Madeline Kahn. They didn't get along. Um, there were that was where you had two sides of the story, Lucy's story and Madeline Kahn's side of the story. But it was that she was originally going to play Agnes Gooch in the movie Mame with Lucy. And according to Lucy, Madeline was terrible at the table read, just reading all of her lines flat with no emotion. And Lucy just said, "Madeline, dear, could you please tell us when we might start to see some glimpses of your performance?" And Madeline said, "Why, Lucy, you are seeing it." Well, needless to say, she was fired the next day. Madeline did not have good things to say about Lucille Ball. Lucille Ball said that she found out that Madeline wanted to do Blazing Saddles with Mel Brooks, and Lucy believes she was intentionally being bad and intentionally trying to get fired. So anyway, those are the two versions of the story, but I haven't heard that about uh, Roseanne and Julia Louise Dreyfus. Um, but maybe you can fill me in there. Uh, what was this here? Chuck and the Three Stooges meet Hercules. Samson Burke is still living. He played Hercules. He's 94. And Johnny Ginger's 91. He was Billy the Kid in Outlaws. Well, it's great they're still around. What was this? Two actresses who played wives on Walking Dead and Breaking Bad were mercilessly bullied online based on their characters. Yeah, it goes on a lot. People can't seem to divorce themselves from the fact that actors are just playing roles. You know, it's interesting. There was a podcast I was listening to with Ted Danson and Mary Steenburgen, you know, two great actors who are married to each other. Mary, you know, she's won an Oscar. He won several Emmys for Cheers. And they were asked about their early relationship. And she was saying how she almost did not date Ted Danson because she thought he was like his character on Cheers. And Mary even laughed about it. And she said, I'm an actress, for God's sake. I, of all people, know better than that. But Ted was so good and so believable. As what was his name on the show? Cheers. I'm blanking on it. Sam Malone. He was so believable that she thought he really was this womanizing jerk. And of course, Ted laughed about it too on the show. So even actors can fall into that trap. Um, uh, well, I didn't like what's his name treated Carol in the first season of Walking Dead. You know, I didn't watch Walking Dead. I've heard of the show, but I haven't. I was talking about Madeline Kahn, Andy. Madeline Kahn, the wonderful comedic actress. She was in Blazing Saddles, Young Frankenstein, even had her own sitcom for a while in the early 80s. Oh, incredible lady. She unfortunately died of ovarian cancer when she was only in her 50s. Oh, but she was just a treasure. Did anybody see Mary on the show Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist? And had Peter Gallagher? No, I'm not familiar with that. Maybe other people here are familiar with it. Well, you know, Andy, you say you love the way Khan spoke. She had a degree in speech therapy. She was originally going to be a speech therapist before she fell into theater. And she also was fully trained in opera, had a beautiful operatic voice. And they did a musical version of 20th Century, you know, which was the classic film with John Barrymore and Carole Lombard. They did it as a musical on Broadway, and it had a semi-operatic score. And Madeline only lasted 3 weeks in it. She said 8 shows a week singing at that level, she just couldn't sustain it, and she had to go. But I wish there was at least some videotape or something. I'd love to have seen her in that production. Oh my God, her doing Carole Lombard. Two great comedians. There, I took a sip and I did not choke this time. You know, I'm not sure if my friend Anastasia is doing a show tonight. I haven't heard from her, but otherwise I would say definitely go to her show in a few minutes because she's normally on at 7 p.m. Pacific time here, but I'm not sure because she's been like me. She's been working a lot also and has been incredibly busy. So she's had to curtail her live streams. I only missed one. I missed the one last week. And when I get off here, I've got to do some studying news events so I can get a head start for tomorrow for the show with Whimsy. And of course, she and I are also, might as well plug it here also, Marianne Haley Moss's book, Dreams need feet to walk on. We are going to be interviewing the author, and I've got just a little of the tail end of the book to finish reading tonight. Whimsy, if you're watching, yes, I'm admitting, but I don't have that much more to read, maybe 20, 30 pages, and I'll be finished, and I will be fully prepared because I love doing author interviews very much with Whimsy. Wait, was this here? Andy Chuck sure is quiet without a Sasha cameo. Well, Sasha's off sleeping somewhere. I'm quiet. I've been talking for like an hour and a half. In fact, one of the reasons I want to get a head start on my homework tonight is because tomorrow morning I have a rather unpleasant errand. Last night I went to the grocery store. And oh, thank you, Andy. I appreciate that. I was going to walk as I usually do, but I ran out of time, and the store was going to close in 15 minutes. I knew I had no choice but to take my car, so I drove there, no problem. Pull out of the parking lot and start driving home, and I hear that. And we've probably all gone through this, where you hear that flap, 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 flap sound from one of the back wheels. I had a frigging flat tire. New tires, only 2 years, well, 2 years old. To me, that's new. So the tire, by the time I got home, it was just trashed. You know, when you drive on a flat tire, that's never good. But I had to get home. I didn't know what else to do. So I drove home. The tire is just ruined. I've got to put a whole new tire on the car. Well, I called my place and they have to order the tire because it's a special custom wider tire that my little Miata sports car needs. They won't have it until tomorrow. And I'm hoping, because it's only about a 5-minute drive from where I live. That's why I go to this place, because they're close by. I'm hoping, I'm praying I can take Fix-A-Flat, stuff you spray in the tire. Yeah, I know that stuff's not good. It ruins the tire, but the tire is ruined anyway. So I'm hoping and praying the tire will reinflate long enough for me to drive 5 minutes to get down there to get the new tire. Otherwise, I'm going to have AAA tow my car down there. Well, no, wait. What am I saying here? I could take an Uber, pick up the tire, come back here, change it myself. I haven't changed a tire in 40 years. I guess I could do it, but I just rather them put it on. If there's any way I can just drive the car there, I'm going to try to do it. If I can't, I have AAA that would tow it. Yeah, we'll see. Anyway, that's what I'm doing tomorrow. That's why I've got to get a head start tonight to prepare for Whimsy's show tomorrow. And let's see, before I go, did anybody else have another question or comment or anything you'd like me to address? Let's see. I saw my good friend Joyce Petrus in the audience, and Joyce is going to be a guest on a future episode with Dr. Whimsy and myself. It's going to be hopefully for our New Year. It's a show we'll do the week before New Year's, between Christmas and New Year's. And I'm excited. I'm excited. She's going to be a terrific guest, and we're going to have her do some predictions for the coming year. And Whimsy and I'll have some predictions also. Hopefully it's going to be better than what we've had to go through this year. We shall see. What was this here? Oh, Andy gives Sasha a hug. Of course I will. I love my little Siamese girl. I honestly don't know where she is right now. She wandered off somewhere. She wants to do her own thing. She's a bit of a loner, and I can be a bit of a loner, and that's probably what makes us so perfectly matched for each other. So does anybody else have a comment or question or anything you'd like me to bring up? Otherwise, I'm going to sign out. I don't think Anastasia's doing a show, but just on the chance she is, I like to give everybody a chance to go over there. Let me see. Do I have my phone here? Did she put any announcement up or anything? I have a feeling she's not doing a show. Oh, here's another bulletin on here. Anthony Gary passed away, who was on General Hospital, the famous Luke and Laura matchup. He was part of that. He was very big on there, won 8 Emmys for it, but passed away at the age of 78. I just saw the bulletin on my phone. I was on General Hospital once. 2 days. I had a tiny, tiny little part many years ago. 2 days on there, but I got to be on the set and everything and experience it. Oh, that's an interesting point you just brought up, Ward. Carl, I mean, not Carl, Rob Reiner and Anthony Gary played friends on an episode of All in the Family. And Andy, you got a message. She's not coming on the show tonight. She's working. That's kind of what I figured. She's been just as busy as I've been lately. We haven't even had time to see each other lately, but we'll make up for lost time. Probably have a little get together this week or something for Christmas. But yeah, I remember that episode. And Anthony Geary, I think, played a gay character on there. And of course, in 1971, that was very controversial. In fact, that may have been the first time it had been addressed on a television sitcom. All in the Family was just a hotbed for controversial topics of the day, things that now we don't think so much about. But anyway, thank you all very much for joining me. It means a lot to me, and your loyalty to me means a lot, as much as anything. And so I always strive to be loyal to you as well, and make it on here in one way or the other. Oh yeah, Rob Reiner and Albert Brooks were best friends growing up in Hollywood. Yeah, yeah, and I saw Whoopi Goldberg on The View today. She was a close friend of Rob Reiner, and it looked to me like she was fighting back tears. And I saw on the local news that Billy Crystal actually, as soon as he got the news, drove out to the house. And reporters said he was outside crying. They all loved each other, Yeah. Oh, yeah, Ward, thank you for pointing that out, because I was talking about people still alive. I think Mel Brooks's 100th birthday is this year. Hope he makes it. I was saying earlier in the show, I was hoping Dick Van Dyke was not going to be like Betty White and pass a week or two before, but he made it to his 100th, and I hope Mel Brooks makes it as well. What an amazing, amazing man. And he and Anne Bancroft, what a beautiful couple. I saw the two of them together once. It was shortly after I moved out to LA. I was working in Westwood Village, and they were having the premiere for one of the, I think it was Rocky 4. There's this big joke. There's like Rocky 67 and Rocky 73. There have been so many sequels made, but Anne Bancroft and Mel Brooks walked the red carpet, and I was just standing on the sidelines watching all the stars enter, and it was delightful because I always loved both of them. Saw Anne Bancroft on stage one time. It was a 2-woman play with Jane Alexander. Saw it, I think it was at the Amundsen Theater here in Los Angeles. And it was done as sort of a theater in the round type of thing, where it was a flat platform stage, with bleacher seating around it. And I sat in the front row, totally by accident, got a ticket in the front row. It was because of a cancellation. And so I was I would say about 3 feet from Anne Bancroft and Jane Alexander where they were performing. It was like I was on stage with them. And when you're that close to the actors on stage, you're scared to death you're going to cough or belch or worse, because everybody in the audience is going to know it. And you're going to disrupt the actors. So I sat very, very still, but it was so exciting to see them. And I know that he and Anne Bancroft had an extraordinary marriage. They were together, God, was it 40, 45 years? It was over 40 years they were married. And I remember once I had a friend go to a book signing. Mel Brooks was signing, and he wanted to get Anne Bancroft's autograph. She was sitting at the table with Mel, and he said Anne was very gracious, but she said, no, this is Mel's night. This is Mel's night. So she declined to do that. She didn't want to take any limelight away from him. And I also have a friend who was acquainted with Mel Brooks, and they were at some event or something where there was like a little private bar area, and Mel Brooks excused himself, and he was just sitting there by himself at the bar, and my friend came over to him, and Mel was just, Anne Bancroft had died a few months earlier, and Mel was just saying, I miss her so much. It's just so hard for me to go to events without Anne. I miss her so very, very much. So it's the great love. And I remember also, I think it was an HBO special or something where Mel Brooks was taking questions from the audience. It was just one of those Q&A things where they were showing clips, and someone in the audience said, what do you consider to be your all-time greatest accomplishment? And he said, I married Anne Bancroft. So that kind of sums it up right there. So, and there's one other story before I sign out. It's short, but Anne Bancroft told us, and she said, well, first of all, she was asked, because they were so different. And she was asked, well, you're so different. How did you two fall in love? And she said, he made me laugh. And I said, that's the guy for me. He makes me laugh all the time. And there was another quote. She said, when I hear his key in the door and he's about to come in, I think to myself, oh, great. The party is about to begin. So that was the kind of marriage they had. We should all be that lucky now, shouldn't we? So anyway, I'm going to sign out now because I've got a lot of work to do tonight. But I just thank you so very much for joining me. And let's see, tomorrow I will be on the Oracle of Whimsy for our show Taco Tuesdays, which is 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. And of course, we love doing it so much, we do it again on Thursdays, Hot Topic Thursdays. We never did settle on an official name for us. I think we're just calling it Hot Topics Thursdays. We try to be a little lighter on that show despite the title. So anyway, Andy, you're having leftover taco pizza right now. Whimsy and I keep joking about how we really should have a plate of tacos in front of us and have margaritas and tacos while we're doing the show. One day, I need to follow through on that. At least put some tacos in the microwave and have a nice margarita with salt around the rim here. Might have to make it a virgin margarita because I learned early on it is never good to be tipsy into a show. It was the time Whimsy came out here. It's a couple of years ago, and we did a rare show where we were actually sitting together side by side instead of doing split screens because she's in Portland and I'm here in Los Angeles. We did a show together, and I had a wine cooler and she had a Heineken, and we got just a little tipsy and a little giddy, and I guess it worked out for the show. But yeah, I've learned it's better not to do that. So anyway, on that note, I'm going to sign out. I thank you all for being here, and I'll see you next week, same time, same place. Goodbye for now.